So here are the top 8 books that I have read since starting my entrepreneurship journey in the order that I read them. Okay, so the first book that I ever read that had anything to do with like entrepreneurship, finances, bettering yourself, blah, blah, blah. Because honestly, I didn't even read that much. I'm not gonna lie. I'm still like a big video guy. So I will binge watch like a lot of YouTube videos, but I wouldn't read that much. So the very first book that I read was Rich Dad, Poor Dad by, of course, Robert Kiyosaki. And I actually read that book out of like sheer boredom because I was still in college and they had quarantined me because my roommate had got COVID. So they put me in a separate room by myself in a whole different dorm. And I didn't have my TV. I didn't have my game. All I had was some of the stuff that I had bought to the school that were in a container. And inside of that container, one of my good friends, like a brother to me, he ended up giving me a book that was Rich Dad Poor Dad. He gave that to me before going to college. I guess kind of like you're growing up here, you need to read this type deal. And of course I didn't touch it until I was in that room, bored out of my mind. And I read that book, and it was one of those books that really opened my eyes up to life. And I think it was a very influential book on my life because like I didn't even know like the basics of what I needed to know. Like I didn't understand like the pure concept that I think a lot of people don't get from a lot of parents, especially in my community, is like you just get more of a roundabout view of how life works. And I was lacking that. And that book definitely was like a puzzle piece just fitting in that wedge, that gap in my life. So Rich Dad Poor Dad was the first book I ever read. Amazing book, strongly, recommend it. Like 99% of people that probably seen this video, that are watching this video right now, probably have already read that book. But for those that are just coming up on their entrepreneurship / success journey or whatever, that would be a good book to start with. All right, so the next book that I read, and this actually, I read this book in the time that I was starting my hire car business, where I was renting out cars and all that good stuff. Because I remember I was reading it while waiting in line at the DMV to get my tag for the new car that I was about to be renting out. And it's called The Richest Man in Babylon by George Clason. And this book, honestly, was one of the most informatively entertaining books that I have read, I think year to date, honestly, because the way that it's structured is like the text itself is not just like regular English. It's like an old Englishy type of text. It's so weird. But basically, it's a book that talks about finances, like how important they are, how to structure them, just a lot of like low-level things that you're like, I should know these things before I try to make more money or as I start to make more money. And the stories in there are freaking amazing. I'm not going to lie. Like, it's a tough read for people that can't get past that. It's not just like traditional English. But once you start catching on to it, like after the first couple of chapters, you start to like get in the groove of how they're speaking. You can kind of make connections on what they're talking about. It is a phenomenal book. It is a phenomenal book. It's one of those books that have like a lot of different small stories inside of it. They come back full circle with like a full plot that you're like, okay, this makes sense. Amazing book. That was the second book I read. I strongly recommend you read that book. It's a book. It's like one of the foundations on like finances. Whenever I see somebody make like a finance video or something, they talk about this book because it's a very great book that is like very simple to read, in my opinion. Once you get past that like non-traditional English text, but it is like the lessons that they wrap up in stories is phenomenal. So Richest Man in Babylon, that was the second book I read. I strongly recommend that you pick that book up as well. All right, so the next book I read, and this probably for some reason was one of the hardest books for me to finish, was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And it's a good book. Like it is a good book, but for some reason, when you get to the middle of the book, it just, I don't know what it is, but it just started to decline for me. And I had to like really push through to finish that book. But it is a great book. The book basically helps with like, mindset around, attracting money to you. If you don't know about like Napoleon Hill and Bob Proctor and all those type of people, they are very into like, I am what I feel, what I bring in from the universe, what I want from the universe will give me, as long as if I want it bad enough, if I say it, I speak it, I think it, like that type of genre or that type of like language and books. So that's what Think and Grow Rich is basically think yourself into wealth. It's a great book, but just for me personally, for some reason, it was just a hard read. Once I got like towards the middle, it was just a hard read for me. I don't know why, it just was. The next book I read was The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. And this book was a great book that talked about basically how your mind works in relation to things that will make you money. So it had a couple different chapters that talked about like how your brain reacts when, you think about, things that give you dopamine and how this transitions to this to where you can make money and, how you're attracting money to you. Like it's almost in the same realm as like Think and Grow Rich, is where like you're attracting money to you when you think this way, or when you act this way, you're making these thoughts happen. Like it's like the Think and Grow Rich and the and Bob Proctor, all their ideologies. But I believe that this book is a little bit more like, it's more science based. Like they actually talk about a lot of science and a lot of studies and all that good stuff. It was a pretty okay read. And I think I wouldn't recommend that book to everybody because a lot of people get bored of it fast, and I can see why. But if you're somebody that likes to read about that type of stuff, then that would be a good book to check out. How to Win and Influence Friends by Dale Carnegie. One of the best books that I have ever read. Even Alex Hormozy says is like, if you just follow this one book, you can go very far in business. And I 100% agree. The reason why I was able to like grow my stores or close the amount of deals that I was doing in my other business was because people liked and trusted me. Just because of the way that I will format my sentences or talk to them, when I'm very selective with the words that I use, it just made them kind of cling to me a little bit more. And that was because of some of the principles that I learned throughout this book. Like, it's better to catch somebody, with, honey with molasses than vinegar. Like all that type of stuff is compiled in this book. And there's a lot of strategical, like literal things that you can implement in your daily life, because everybody has family, everybody has spouses, everybody has those people at work maybe you like or don't like, but it gives tactical steps about how you can get people to actually like you, and therefore in turn you would probably get what you want out of them, because if they like you, they will likely do whatever you want them to do for you. All right, so after those books, I started to get more and more tactical and strategic with the things that I was reading, because I was beginning to start more businesses, right? So I was like, I need things that will help me grow my businesses. So I read Sold or Be Sold by Grant Cardone. Phenomenal book. If you're into sales, if you're not into sales, doesn't matter. I think you should read the book. Just like the How to Win Friends and Influence People. In my opinion, I feel like that's also a selling book. But this book, Sold or Be Sold, is a great book by Grant Cardone, where he talks about like strategic strategies to be able to sell to other people. What type of ideology do you have to be accustomed to be able to actually sell to other people? You need to believe in your product. You need to actually care about the thing that you're giving out, because they'll be able to tell with your tone and your choice of words, all kinds of stuff. Very tactical book on how to be better in sales. So that was a great book for me. If you're somebody that's like, hey, it's time to get more tactical, that's one of the books that I would start with, especially if you are selling from B2C. All right, your next 5 moves by Patrick Bet-David. This is definitely an advanced book. If you are somebody with a very, very small business, this book might not apply to you like once you get towards the middle of the book. And the only reason I say that is because it did not apply to me until I got to the middle of the book, until I started to actually grow my business and get a little bit farther aligned. But Patrick Bet-David is somebody that is really big in the industry of entrepreneurship, with valuetainment, all kinds of stuff. And he's so high up that sometimes he speaks to people that are a little bit higher than like where a lot of people are down here. So like some of the things he started to give towards the middle and the end of the book were kind of high. And they're great things to know, but they just weren't things that I could implement in my business today. But it's a very tactical book. It's an awesome book by Patrick Bet-David. So if you're looking, again, more tactical to grow your business, that is another book that I would recommend for you. But just be cautious that some things in that book are not applicable to you yet in your business. And if not, that's fine. You can always go back and read it again. But I just want to prepare you before you read that book, if you do choose to do so. And last but not least, we got The Motive by Patrick Lencioni. And I actually got this book recommendation from Alex Hormozy. So Alex Hormozy was talking about this book, and I found it very interesting the way that he talked about it. But I was like, let me go ahead and give it a read. It is a phenomenal book. It is a phenomenal book. It teaches you how a real CEO should be. And in my opinion, again, same thing, just like the Patrick Bet-David book, is this might be ahead of where you are right now, which is totally fine. I loved it. I loved the book. It really was about operating like a company with different legs, and it was great. If you love business, that is a great book to read. And it really opened up my eyes about how I treat my team, how I treat, people that I want to be a part of my team, and how I look at business as a whole. It was a phenomenal book, and it was not that big. It, I think, took me like 2 days to read. It is not that big, but I strongly recommend you read that book if you are really into business stuff. because it was a great book. And again, I don't like to read. So when I'm saying these are good books, that means they're good books, because again, I'm not just a chronic reader. Like I will binge watch YouTube podcasts, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. I will do that before I read. So when I read and say it's a good book, I promise you it's a good book. If it's not a good book, let me know down in the comments that I'm lying, and we will argue down there. But they are great books. So those are the 8 books that I read in the order of my entrepreneurship journey. And honestly, all of them, I love them. I don't think I've read a bad book yet. But I will do a list of, 10 books. If this video does well, then I'll add some more books, because there's some books that I read after that I believe were just bangers. But I wanted to give you the books that kind of got me like going into the businesses that I started, just for anybody else that is getting started or getting into it. So if you like the video, I don't want anything from you. All that I ask is that you like and share it with somebody that needs to hear it, because we all got friends that need to read more so they can grow more, so they can make more. For everybody that's been rocking with me, I appreciate you. Everybody new, hello and welcome. And I will see you guys on the next video. Peace.